Demandred knelt in the pit of doom, reveling in the carnage and chaos he and loosed therein. No, Rand Outdoors' new pets had wrought. Memories stirred and boiled within as the Dark Lord surveyed the perfectly executed atrocity. Althor would never trust these poor excuses for eyes said, Demandred. Dark Lord? The voice resonated from everywhere at once. You served my purposes for your time. The voice intoned with a pensive note to it. Where was the ecstasy, the pain of the Dark Lord's voice? These words felt. He paused before he could even think it. More vast, more subtle, more. Great Lord, have I grown apart from what you were? The voice echoed from around and inside of him, from before him and from after. But it is intuitively obvious to the casual observer what you must become. Horror dawned into Demandred, along with realization of who this voice must be. A blinding white light engulfed him. Fire compressed a fluid and heated beyond white hot. It came from everywhere at once, more powerful than he had ever seen, and one word flitted across his mind: balefire. Demandred knelt in the pit of doom, and for once he did not care that Shadar Haran watched his trembling, that eyeless, impassive gaze. Have I not done well, Great Lord? The Great Lord's laughter filled Demandred's head. Welcome back to your Friday fix of the Gleemen, everyone. I'm Drew, your host, and today I'm here to talk to you about something that stuck with me since my teenage years. The revisions, but not quite retcons, that Jordan enacted as he was growing this series. We're creatures of pattern recognition and of habit, and part of that state of being is extracting out what's continuous through life. And then we represent that to each other as stories. Well, in our stories, we want continuity. When someone comes along and tells us a wonderful story, especially when they build a new world for us to step into and to explore with them, we need that world to make sense and to stay continuous and complete. So today I want to ask the question, is this what Jordan did as he was cultivating and finding his way through his vision of what the Wheel of Time would be? I'll try and look at both sides of each matter and weigh in the final analysis whether I think it was justified and if it made sense, and at the end we can decide if indeed Jordan did nothing wrong. When Robert Jordan opens the Eye of the World, he knew obviously that he wanted the one power to be a well of energy fueling what would fill in for magic in this series. He knew that he wanted a male half and a female half that were distinct things, and he had decided that he was going to use the flavor of primordial elements to describe the effects that were used. Personally, beyond this, I don't think he had much more definition, because the portrayals of channeling throughout the Eye of the World, and even the Great Hunt at times, don't match what we see canonically described as channeling from late in The Dragon Reborn onward. And that's okay. There's another caveat to this subject, though. Every character through whose eyes we see channeling depicted early in the series do not understand channeling. They don't know how the power works, or if they have some inkling, they're by no means experts in how to wield it. So the argument can be made that the early portrayals of channeling are skewed from the point of view through which we're getting them. I don't entirely agree, that is so, but the point is there. So, for me, and I think for everyone, honestly, the depiction of channeling evolving from book 1 and 2 into what we see from late book 3 onward is altogether positive. When we begin the series, the Forsaken are monsters that are underneath the bed, or the horrors that are out in the night. They're the boogeyman of folklore. And when we're introduced to them, the first one we see is a mysterious man in a blood-red cloak with eyes and mouth of fire, stalking the 3 boys in their dreams, and mysteriously appearing and really terrorizing them, putting them through horrorscapes as he tries to suss out which of you is Luz Theron Reborn. What about Agenor and Bathamiel? Agenor's introduced to us as an essentially mummified corpse of a man, desiccated and aged beyond any semblance of life, and Bathamiel is so decayed and corroded by the passage of time, partially sealed within the boar, that even his face could not be shown. He's expertly portrayed as even more horrific than Agenor. So how do we go from evocative and terrifying, arguably, tropes of villains like we would see in classic fantasy, they're true monsters in the physical sense, to the very human and even at times relatable Forsaken we see later in the series? Early on, we have evil genuinely incarnated. We see the Forsaken as malevolence and evil for its own sake, put forth for the heroes to strive against. But then, starting with a certain woman we meet in book 2, and expanding to the rest of the Forsaken we meet throughout the series, what we're seeing is not pure evil. What we're seeing are understandable and relatable human beings led awfully astray by petty but genuinely human motives, which are just uplifted and magnified by the degree of power and influence that was afforded to them. Like the magic system developing as the books progressed, this was an obvious shift in tone, but a very positive one. I think Jordan began paying homage to the genre he loved, and as he was hatching out this vision that he had, he discovered the kind of villain he wanted to struggle against. And I don't know anyone who complains about this one either. The Matt we know from Eye of the World would best be cast in the TV show as probably this guy. The Matt we know from The Great Hunt Forward would probably be best cast as this guy. Look, sometimes a character is just not working and you have to rewrite. What about the dagger? Can't we argue that most of Eye of the World, Matt, is really just an influence of him being possessed and struggling against this evil that is even the shadow fears? That's kind of fair. Personally, Jordan probably felt like Matt wasn't working, and taking him to the tower and having a deeply traumatic experience was a perfect time to reboot who this character was. Nobody complains. Again. So, we're 3 for 3. Jordan has made a turn in what he has set up, and all of them have been for the better so far. Rand was completely insane by the Dragon Reborn. He runs off, which was probably a good choice. He needed some agency of his own by this point. And he kills some people unprovoked and then stands them up with the power and makes them bow to him without their heads. Like you do. He was crazy. Yeah, but he did kind of pull it together and executed the rest of his plan throughout that book surprisingly well. Except for the whole doing the dead person thing again with the girl. But he was wielding Kalendor that amplifies the taint and the power. So that's a pattern we see throughout the story. Was Rand's insanity dialed back? Or was it always supposed to be intermittent? Coming and going, ebbing and flowing? I think both. Personally, it felt like Jordan, well, we know Jordan was plotting a 6-book series, and by the middle of that series, we need to see what Saidin could do to a man's mind. When we decided that we're going to have a 9 or 12 book series, we're going to need some more mileage out of said sanity meter. So, I think this was some of both. Oh, and then there's Duma as well. I think we all agree where Rand's sanity meter was after that. Yeah, Perrin's story was great. Like, he had struggled with the whole wolf thing. That was pretty scary. And then he struggled with the leadership thing, and that was difficult. And then he got married on top of that. Guys, he just found out he can talk to wolves, became the leader of people he grew up with, and he's getting married. That's a lot to happen. But then he decides he's okay with the wolves, wrestles through that struggle, accepts the burden of responsibility of his leadership, and... okay, no, he still doesn't understand being married. And then Perrin's not okay with the wolves anymore, and he's really struggling with his leadership responsibilities again, and... well, yeah, there's the thing with fighting. Look, I loved Perrin, I enjoyed Perrin's arc, and then Perrin's arc became the hardest thing for me about a certain section of the series. In retrospect, the difficulty was that Mr. Jordan had already worked through Perrin's character struggles, and again, for what felt like pacing reasons to me, he regressed Perrin's character development so that we could get some more mileage out of those same difficulties. And it just didn't have the same impact going back through it the second time. That one may be more disagreed with. I know Perrin can be a fan favorite, or Perrin can really grate on people's nerves. I'll let you decide either way on that one. It's not like Jordan stepped back into his world and retconned something and decided that one person shot first instead of the other one, who we all know shot first, or edited a face on top of another face in a satisfyingly climactic scene at the end of the series. But Team Android was totally a part of the books. If you've kept up with news in the community at all, you know that Jordan had definitely planned up through the Lord of Chaos that Mazrim Taim and Demandred were one and the same. And then Mr. Jordan exclusively and affirmatively said, no, that's not what's happening. This one really bothered me, especially in my teenage years, because, again, we're pattern-seeking creatures, and we need continuity. We need to know that things make sense. Well, when you read The Lord of Chaos, it makes sense that Mazrim Taim is a persona for Demandred. There seems to be no question about it. As an adult, having worked through a lot of creative projects myself, and having read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's commentary, after he read through the notes and after he took an epic undertaking of picking up this series where Mr. Jordan left off and crossing the finish line, I realized that an artist unfolding their work needs room to make changes. And it's very reasonable in retrospect to me that Mazrim Taim started as a persona. He started as a mask for Demandred. And by the time Robert Jordan had reached beyond Lord of Chaos, Mazrim Taim had become more than a persona. He had become a character who most likely Demandred, as Robert Jordan knew him in his mind, could never pose as. And so what Robert Jordan's original plans were to work Demandred into the series after this change would have been, we'll never know. In summary on this one, did Robert Jordan do us dirty? First of all, don't get up in the middle of the night and go mucking around in dark closets in old cities, okay? You're just asking for it. Secondly, again, if you're keeping up with the community news, you know that Tamandred originally killed Asmodean. So our favorite tutor was offed by our favorite villain who didn't exist. Well, as you saw at the beginning of the episode, Jordan balefired Tamandred out of the story at some point, and somebody else had to do the job. So, if it was intuitively obvious to you, the casual observer, I'm happy for you. These were some of the most obvious examples to me where Robert Jordan started in one direction as he was laying his groundwork, decided that that direction didn't serve his story best, and about-faced or adjusted what he was doing. There are definitely some others that have been talked about throughout the community and would be fun to hash through in detail. But the nugget at the center of all of these changes, for me, is that Robert Jordan was focusing on characters. You came to the Wheel of Time for the fireballs and the monsters. We all did, but we stayed for the characters. Every one of these choices that Jordan made was an artistic choice, not just on how he wanted a plot to unfold, but primarily on how he wanted these characters to develop. And character development, character persona, and character agency were some of the strongest points throughout the narrative of the Wheel of Time. Final assessment of, did Jordan do us dirty with his changes? No. I think lesser authors would have stuck to old outlines, and they would have finished what had become an uninspired story for them. Robert Jordan had what it took as an author to incorporate what he had already published and turn and move on with the characters he was discovering as the books unfolded. All in all, I'm going to stick with Jordan did nothing wrong. Except for Tamandred. I mean,